Dark ambient music begins softly. You've probably never heard the name Israel Keyes, and that's exactly how he wanted it. While most serial killers crave infamy, Israel Keyes craved silence. He wanted to operate in the shadows, unnoticed, untraceable, and free. Unlike the infamous names we all recognize, Bundy, Dahmer, Gacy, Keyes worked hard to keep his crimes buried, literally and metaphorically. But what makes him terrifying isn't just the body count, it's the way he did it. The control, the patience, the planning. Israel Keyes was a construction worker, a quiet guy from Anchorage, Alaska. He had a daughter, a girlfriend, and a solid reputation as someone you'd trust to remodel your home. No one, not neighbors, not friends, not even his family, had any idea what he was doing when he disappeared for days or weeks at a time. But during those trips, Israel wasn't vacationing. He was hunting. Keyes would fly to a random city in the United States, rent a car, and drive, sometimes for hundreds of miles, with no phone tracking him, no credit card linking him to the area. Why? Because he'd buried something ahead of time, something chilling, what he called his kill kits. These were buckets or bags sealed with tape and buried in isolated areas, deep in the woods, under brush, behind motels. Each one loaded with weapons, zip ties, ammunition, silencers, chemicals to dissolve remains, even shovels to bury bodies. He left these kits years in advance. Think about that. He would travel across the country and bury tools for murders he hadn't even planned yet. That's how meticulous he was. When the time came, he'd return, dig up the kit, find a victim, and then vanish again, with no connection to the person, the place, or the crime. He didn't target people he knew. In fact, he specifically avoided them. That's why law enforcement couldn't find a pattern. There wasn't one. Keyes told the FBI he studied other serial killers, not to copy them, but to beat them. He learned from their mistakes. He didn't want to get caught. He didn't want the fame. He wanted control. He once told investigators in his own chilling words, "I tried to avoid detection by being completely random. There's no one who can figure out who I killed, not even me anymore." One time he flew to Chicago, rented a tree and drove all the way to Vermont, over 1,000 miles, just to commit a murder. And he did. In 2011, he broke into the home of an elderly couple, Bill and Lorraine Currier. He had buried a kill kit near their neighborhood 2 years prior. The couple never saw it coming. He abducted them, took them to an abandoned farmhouse, and murdered them. Then he vanished back into the night. No one even knew they were gone until much later. And even then, there were no clues. Nothing linked the crime to him. Israel Keyes was a ghost, a phantom predator. He thrived on the chaos he created, but even more on the silence that followed. He bragged during interrogation that there were more victims, many more, but he refused to say who. In fact, he made it a game. He liked that the FBI had no way to connect the dots. He said things like, "I would leave town, leave the crime scene, and just go fishing like nothing ever happened. No guilt, no trace." That's how he lived. Calm on the outside, monster within. His crimes spanned the entire US, from Alaska to New York, Vermont to Texas. No region was safe. He purposely chose places far from each other so investigators couldn't create any geographical profile. No motive, no connection, no pattern. He kept trophies, not the usual kind, like photos or body parts. Instead, he kept secrets, hidden places, details only he knew. Because for Keyes, the real thrill wasn't just the murder. It was knowing that only he knew what he'd done. It was his private story, a puzzle he never intended anyone to solve. That's why when people finally learned about Israel Keyes, it wasn't through headlines. It wasn't after a dramatic chase. It was only after one mistake, one slip-up that exposed a trail of horror the country had missed for over a decade. But before that mistake, before the confession, before his name was even in the news, Israel Keyes had already committed the perfect crime, more than once. And the scariest part? He could have killed someone you know, and you'd never have a clue. Music fades into eerie silence.
As police stepped through the front door of Mr. Harris's home, the silence was unnerving. Everything inside appeared normal, too normal. The living room was spotless, family-style photos on the walls. A faint smell of lemon cleaner still lingered. It was the kind of home you'd never suspect. But to trained eyes, small inconsistencies stood out. A vent that looked newer than the rest. Floorboards that echoed slightly different. And then, a scratch, just below the edge of a bookcase. A sharp-eyed officer leaned in, tapping against the wall. Hollow. They moved the shelf. Behind it, a false wall. What they discovered beyond that barrier was something no amount of training could prepare them for. The room was cold, small, completely sealed. No windows, no sound. Just a dim light flickering from above, casting long shadows across a chilling scene. Along one wall were shelves lined with glass jars, each containing something grotesque. Fingers, teeth, locks of hair, tiny labels with names and dates. Next to them sat old Polaroid photographs, each capturing the terrified faces of women in their final moments. It was a shrine of suffering. In the center of the room stood a crude altar. Bones were arranged in strange patterns. Wax from melted candles had pooled around it. There were markings on the walls, symbols, obsessive phrases scrawled over and over in red ink. Mine forever. Cleansed through pain. No one leaves. This wasn't just a killer's hideout. It was a place of ritual, of obsession. Investigators found detailed journals, hundreds of pages documenting abductions, routines, and psychological breakdowns. Mr. Harris had tracked everything: times, locations, emotional reactions, even what each victim said in their final moments. It was methodical, calculated, chilling. The community was shaken to its core. This was the man who had attended their church services, waved from his porch, handed out Halloween candy with a warm smile. One neighbor collapsed when she saw the news. Another was quoted saying, "I trusted him with my children." The betrayal cut deeper than the crimes themselves. The survivor, whose bravery brought this monster to justice, testified in court. Her voice trembled, but she stood strong, recounting every horrific detail. The jury was silent. The room was heavy. When the verdict was delivered, guilty on all counts, relief flooded the courtroom. Mr. Harris was sentenced to life without the possibility of parole. Maple Street would never be the same again. The house was boarded up. Locals still avoid walking past it even in daylight. Some swear they hear sounds from within, cries, whispers, the echoes of pain that linger long after justice is served. If this story gripped you, disturbed you, or opened your eyes to the horrors that can hide in plain sight, then you're in the right place. Like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with others who crave the raw, unfiltered truth behind the world's darkest crimes. Because sometimes the most terrifying monsters live right next door.